Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
I do theoretical physics on a computer. So today I will tell you about how you deal with a machine. Okay, so it is something that all of you may be very, very familiar with. I must say that the first machine that, from whatever he read, it obviously I have seen the evolution of computers to some extent, and the first machine I used is perhaps slower than most of yours, was perhaps much slower than most of your cell phones. So I think it was 256 MB processor or something like that. It took hours for us to get anything done, and when it went to 1 GB, it was very thrilling. So now you know I work with and a part of my research, since I do what is called many body problem, which is interacting particles, okay, and most what I do is usually nuclei. Therefore, we often end up with equations that need to be solved numerically. All right. So there are very few problems which one can solve with pen and paper, and if that can be done, that's amazing. But most of physics is not that kind. You end up with equations where you have to deal with the finiteness of the machine. Okay, so that's what I'm going to talk about today as well as tomorrow, and I will do this by introducing the some aspects of algorithms that one has to keep in mind. These are very simple algorithms, but from these simple algorithms, it illustrates some basic principles we need to observe. Okay, so so first, if I think of math, the math on a machine is very different from the math that you do on or in real life. For instance, anything like if I have to pick up the largest number, what would you pick? Can be any number that is large, right? Whereas on a machine, there is a value, there is an answer to this. What is the largest number? What is the smallest number? Okay, and that depends on whether you want to use that number as an integer or a real number. Okay, and that makes a lot of difference. So why do all these things come? These come because we always have a finite resource on a machine. For example, 32 bits. Okay, so if I'm given 32 bits and I need to store information, I need to do this within what I have. Okay, so now suppose I have an integer. For an integer, 1 bit is reserved for the sign of the integer. So that leaves me with 31 bits. So what could be the number what is the largest number I can have? 2 raised to 31, right? Because it always is stored as zeros and 1. You'll have to convert any number that you know in decimals to binary. So the largest I'm going to have is 2 raised to 31, and that is roughly 2 into 10 to the 9 as a decimal number. That's it. But as a real number, again, it depends on whether you're storing it as a single precision number or a double precision number. Okay, the limits will be certainly more than this, but again, it's not infinite. Okay, so if I have a real number, then what do I have to contend with? I have to take care of the sign, so that already loses a bit for me. Okay, I have to use the fact that I have to find a way of writing a number. Usually one writes a number in scientific notation, where you have one place before the decimal, then places after the decimal, and then you store the rest in the exponent. Okay, the exponent itself could be positive or negative. Therefore, you have to contend with the sign of the exponent. So in order not to lose extra information on the sign of the exponent, usually there is a bias that is added. some finite number of bits are assigned and a bias is added so that you only have to deal with positive numbers in the exponent. Okay? And you can always figure out what your number is by subtracting the bias. Okay? So therefore, if I have a real number, what is called in single precision, again 1 goes for the sign, then I'm left with 31 bits. Now with these 31 bits, I need to divide it between the mantissa and the exponent. Now usually, so that depends again on the IEEE standard. So usually, let's say you give 8 bits for the exponent. So in order that you don't lose 1 bit there, you have a bias so that you always have positive numbers. Okay? Then the rest, which is now 23, correct? Which is 23, which is left for the mantissa, and that is, again, that depends on what your convention is. You could have something like, 1 place before decimal and then places after the decimal, or you could choose to remove this. Okay? But whatever it is, it's only going to be finite number of bits. Okay? So now, the largest number you can have is something like 10 to the 40, and the smallest is also some 10 to the minus 38, 39, 40. So let's roughly put 10 to the 40. So this is the range. Okay? But now if I move to double precision, I get double the number of bits available for me. In double precision, these numbers can change a bit. But again, the smallest and largest, so maybe you will give a little more for the exponent, 1 goes for the sign, and the remaining goes for the mantissa. But it's not too much. As I suppose 52 bits go for the mantissa, 11 go for the exponent, and 1 for the sign. That gives you 64. Okay? So that again in double precision, the largest number is about 10 raised to 300 and the smallest is roughly that. This is just an order of magnitude. But that's nowhere near the actual numbers that you deal with. Okay? So therefore, when one uses a computer for scientific computing, one really has to worry about these limits within which one has to work. Okay? So why is this important? Let me give you an example. Suppose I want to raise 2 to an integer. I can do that. All right? And given this, I know I'm going to get something meaningful as long as n is less than 31. It puts a limit, but I can work with that. But now what will happen if I do this? As long as n, or rather 2n, is less than 31, I'll get something meaningful. But what happens if 2n exceeds? If 2n exceeds 31, then on a computer, this just becomes minus 2 to the n. That's absolutely wrong. Yeah? Similarly, when I have 2 real numbers, okay? So suppose I have 1 to 1, I'm going to add some other number a. When I consider this as a real number, so I'm just going to put 1 point to say that it's a real number, because usually you need to make this distinction on a machine. For example, suppose I have 1 by 3. Again, it depends on the software, the IEEE standards, but it's a usual good practice. If I write 1 by 3 just like that on a machine, the answer is 0 because it thinks it's an integer. So usual practice is to somehow emphasize that you have to store the result as a real number, so you put a 1 point. All right? Or for example, if I'm interested in computing a volume, I would just divide by a 3. So the numerator is already a real. Then if I divide by an integer, the answer is still stored as a real. But if I do an integer by integer division, the answer is an integer for a machine. Okay? There are some higher level programs which are more forgiving. Okay? So they would assume, they would understand what you're trying to say and convert it. But a very, if you need speed, you need to work with programs where you develop the algorithms so that you know what is going on and so on and so forth. And this is usually done all at once. For example, in something like C or Fortran or C++. Python is very different. Python is an interface where you work on it and then it calls programs and then it does things for you. Okay? But the back end is what I would be worried about. Okay? So when I have it as a real number, okay, I can't have A to be arbitrarily small. Okay? Because on a machine, it is one where the sign is taken to be positive, the exponent has been taken care of. So now I'm only worried at the level of the mantissa. Okay? So now if I store it in single precision, what will happen? If I start with some A, all right, let's take A equal to 1 itself, and subsequently divide A by 2. So I call that my new A, and then divide that new A by 2 again, call that my new A, and so on and so forth. Do this recursively. So every step I'm going to add a quantity A to 1. In the first step it is 1, in the next step it's 0.5, then 0.25, then go on decreasing it. You will see at some point your answer will no longer reflect the smallness of A. All right? And when will that happen? It will happen the minute you hit the smallest expansion that you can have for the mantissa. So suppose I have an expansion. So let's say the first bit is already fixed for me, and I have, so let's say it is, how do we have it? So you have an expansion. So I'm not going to worry about the place before the decimal, but after the decimal point, I'm going to have an expansion which is going to look as 2 power minus n A to the n, where n goes from 1 all the way to 23. Right? So the smaller and smaller this A becomes, the answer, the difference, will lose the significant bits that A adds to it, and therefore the answer will be approximated as 1. Now that's not so bad, but it tells you that when you do a real number manipulation, there is a limit what you can have in this form. The real beast exists the minute you start subtractions. Subtraction of 2 reals. When I subtract 2 reals, then if these are roughly the same in magnitude, then the difference between them can be smaller than what your computer can store. Once that happens, your computer can also give you completely random values. Okay? So you have to make sure that you keep this in mind, something like this, which this is called subtractive cancellation, and this is called precision. So now, if you ask how precise is anything that you evaluate on a computer, it can be as precise as what the machine allows it to be. So in single precision, I can get any answer as precise as 2 raised to minus 23, which is roughly around 10 to the minus 7. In double precision, it is 2 raised to minus 52, which is roughly around 10 to the minus 14. That's it. Okay? So that's something to always keep in mind. Okay? So how does this affect an algorithm? So let's take a very simple example, which is that of taking a derivative. All right? So if I'm given a function f of x, you know how to find the derivative, right? Mathematically, it is this. X plus delta x minus f of x divided by delta x, right? But you cannot actually achieve this, take this limit all the way to 0 on a machine. You see disastrous effects coming in. Okay? So now, if I have to come up with an algorithm for finding the derivative, the easiest is to exactly implement this for a finite h, and I know that if I keep decreasing the h, the errors will improve. Now there is going to be some point where the errors will stop improving and it starts to build up. So therefore, for a finite h, which is a finite delta x here, I will have to figure out the error that the algorithm makes. Okay? So this way of setting up So if I have an algorithm for doing the defining a derivative exactly this way, which is df dx, which I call f prime of x, is f of x plus h minus f of x over h, where h is finite, small but finite, and I'll tell you what small is and what finite means here. Okay? If I do this, this algorithm has a name. It is called forward difference. What else can I do? I can also do backward difference. From f of x, I can subtract f of x minus h. Okay? So that's one. Then I can do f of x minus f of x minus h divided by h. This is called the backward difference. Then you have the central difference, okay, which is evaluate the function at x plus h, evaluate the function at x minus h, divide by the interval to h. This is the central difference. All of these are algorithms, when you keep h finite, are algorithms that will give you the first derivative of a function. Okay? Now what is the difference? The difference lies in the error that each of these algorithms have, because bear in mind, you cannot take h to 0. That doesn't exist, because what happens if you make h very, very small? F of x plus h or minus h is not very different from f of x. So you end up cancelling numbers which are very close. Therefore, the difference cannot be stored. Then you're dividing it by h. That's a disaster. Okay? So you will get complete nonsense, and I'll show you that on the machine in a minute. Okay? But let's understand how to even figure out what is the error in each of these algorithms. Alright? The way you do it is by a simple Taylor series expansion. You want to expand the function in the neighborhood of h. So you just let's take f of x plus h. When h is small, so the neighborhood of x, this becomes f of x plus h times f prime of x plus h square over 2 factorial f double prime of x plus etc. Since I'm interested in f prime, I'm going to not worry about these terms. Okay? Now, what is it I have to do? To get f prime, the definition of f prime of x, I take f of x plus h, subtract f of x, divide by h. So that gives me f prime of x plus whatever is the truncation. What would my truncation error be? The truncation error that you can have if you plug in the expansion of f of x here, the truncation error is h f double prime of x divided by 2. Yeah. The error you make by ignoring this term, because what is it you're doing? You're trying to, if I take h to be very, very small, okay, this side will, the definition for f prime will be exact, right, because that's your derivative. because you want to find the slope at a point, right? But I cannot take, so if I can take h very small, then I can ignore this term. So what happens if I cannot ignore that term? Then I'll have to keep that. So that, because h can only be finite, I will necessarily introduce a finite error in my algorithm. You will automatically have an error. You're not adding an error, you will have the error because you cannot take your h to 0. Because you see, the definition of a derivative makes sense only if I can take h to 0, right? Because what is it you're trying to do? If I have a function f of x and x, okay, and I want the slope at this point, all this algorithm says is, you call this point x, you call the neighboring point x plus h, okay, and you minimize the interval so that this tangent finally approaches exactly this point here. So you make this interval smaller and smaller, which means you have to take your h to 0. If you cannot take your h to 0, there is an error you cause. And that is the error which is called the truncation error. Okay? Because in some sense, if your h is not small, you will have an h square term, h cube term, and so on. So the largest error you make is h square. Correct? And that divided by h gives you this term. So this is the error in the algorithm called the truncation error, or the error in the algorithm, or algorithm error. Yeah?
Yes, sir. So you have written in the Taylor expansion that f of x is approximately equal to f of x.
Which one? No. If I keep all my terms, yes, but I'm going to I'm already truncating it here, you see. I've already removed an h cube.
So if you don't truncate it,
No, there is no problem. If I don't truncate it, I'm making an expansion in the neighborhood of a point. It's a Taylor series expansion, okay? But what I'm doing here is to truncate, I'm going to truncate this guy given that h is small. Because if I keep my h very small, then I can remove even the h square term. And I will, as I take h to 0, I will get my derivative, which is the slope at a point. There's no problem. But because I keep h finite, I will end up introducing an error, which will be an h square term, h cube term, h to the 4th, and so on and so forth. But this guy will be the dominating term. So the dominating part of the error is the error that the algorithm has. And this does not go away. Okay? So as h becomes small, you will improve it. And that's what you expect. Even mathematically, that's what you expect. That as I keep decreasing my h, the derivative has to improve. But then there is another beast you have to contend with, which is the fact that f of x plus h and f of x will become very close to each other. So therefore, that is going to put a stop to the improvement in the algorithm. So every algorithm will have a parameter which you can vary and improve it. But the finiteness of the machine will stop that improvement, in fact will make it worse. Okay? So the error that comes because of the finiteness of the machine is called the round off error. That is an inherent error just because you have only 32 bits. At best you may give me 64 bits. But whatever it is, you're giving me something finite. Alright? So therefore, this is one error, which is error in the algorithm. But the algorithm itself takes a difference between these two. Okay? So what will this be? At best, this will be some value epsilon m called the machine precision, which will be 10 to the minus 7 if it is a real number, or 10 to the minus 14, if it is a real number in single precision, or 10 to the minus 14 if you do the entire thing in double precision. Okay? Divided by h. In any case, it is some number, some finite number divided by h. So you have this competition between a term which is h and a term which is 1 over h. At some point, the 1 over h will become important. And that is the reason you cannot arbitrarily make h small, because the error in the algorithm shows that keep decreasing h, the algorithm is going to improve. Indeed, it will improve. But because you have a competing term here, that is going to make your the error build up after a particular h. Okay, so the total error in the algorithm, just because you are using a computer, okay, is nothing else, is going to go as some a times h plus b times 1 over h. So there is really a competition in this simple example between improving an algorithm versus taking into account the fact that your machine only has 32 bits for you. Okay? This is the story not only in this, but in every algorithm you do. For example, what will happen to backward difference? What would be the error? Same thing. Same thing, right? What about central difference?
Difference will be slightly more than the other.
What will happen? So let's see. There is a reason, right? So the forward and backward, I agree, will be the same. Whether you take x plus h and subtract f of x and then get the slope, or you do f of x minus h, there is not going to be, algorithmically, it's not going to make any difference. So why the central difference? So let's see. So you have the central difference there. So let's expand f of x minus h, and I'm going to truncate at the second term, which means after h square, I'm not going to worry. Okay. So no, maybe here I have to worry about more terms. So then this would be what? F of x minus h, f prime of x plus h square by 2 factorial f double prime of x. Okay. Now, if I subtract the two, which is what the algorithm tells me to do. If you do that, then you will have 2hf. So let's subtract the two. If I take the difference, f of x plus h minus f of x minus h, then this becomes what? 2h f prime of x. This one cancels out. Okay. So this, of course, has given you the definition of f prime. So let's divide by 2h. No, I truncated. What would be the next term? So if I keep my h very, very small, then yes, I have got it exact. But I can't. So let's write some more terms here, because I have to somehow get a non-zero power of h. That is going to be my error. All right. So then what do I have here? I'll have the next term will be plus h cube by 3 factorial f third derivative plus h to the 4 over 4 factorial. I'm going to denote it this way, okay? And let's leave it at that, okay? So this one will be minus h cube by 3 factorial f third derivative plus h to the 4 over 4 factorial. Precisely, the even powers cancel, the odd powers survive. The largest odd power is the h cube. That tells you that if I plug the expansion into this formula, the truncation error will be h cube by 3 factorial f third derivative at function, third derivative of the function at x divided by 2h, right? So then this factor cancels, so I have an h square, all right? So the truncation error goes as h square. So that's certainly an improvement over the forward and the backward difference. Now all of this assumes that your derivatives are well behaved, because otherwise you can't even take this entire exercise becomes completely meaningless if my derivatives explode. Okay, so you've already made that assumption. So for example, in your forward and backward difference, you had the truncation error proportional to the second derivative times h. So the second derivative should not become very large. Similarly, here too, your third derivative should not become very large. Of course, if it vanishes, that's fantastic. Then you've got something exact. Okay, because then if that derivative and all the higher derivatives vanish, then you have a polynomial and you're through. Okay. So therefore, when you have something like the central difference, so this is total error for central difference. Here, this goes as some a times or a prime times h square plus still a b prime over h. Why? Because again, I'm taking the difference between two terms, which will ultimately end up to be two real numbers, which are very close to each other. Therefore, there is a limit to how close they can be, and that will grow as 1 over h, that error. All right. So therefore, again, I can improve my algorithm, and algorithm improves fast compared to forward and backward. The central difference improves fast as I decrease h, but the devil is sitting right here. You have the 1 over h. Okay. So just to give you an idea of how this actually looks like, let me show you something. Hopefully this will start up. All right. So the first thing I want to do is, as an example of a function, I want to find out what happens if I have e of h. E of x. I want to take derivative of e of x. Okay. Exponential x. In the forward, and let's use forward difference. Let's not worry about backward difference because it's the same. If f of x is exponential of x, I want to find out f prime of x. I need to give an x at some x naught. Okay. This, using the forward difference algorithm, is going to be correct. Therefore, this is e of x naught into e of h minus 1 divided by h. There's no problem in this. This is this is going to be evaluated perfectly for you. Okay. The trouble will be in this term because it depends on h, which you're going to make smaller and smaller in order to improve your algorithm. Okay. So now let's see what I get. I have found the difference at x equal to 1. You see the exact. It's e to the x evaluated at x equal to 1. All right. So you see the first column there is h. The second column gives the exact answer, because always when you write an algorithm, you should never try doing something where you do not know the answer. So first you try to, if it's an integration, try to integrate dx, okay, between a and b. If it is going to be differentiation, anything, you can differentiate x. Here I chose to differentiate f of x because I just don't want a polynomial. All right. So therefore I have, this is the exact answer. This is the answer in forward difference, and this is central difference. Okay. We will see how it improves as I decrease h. This tracks e to the h minus 1, and this is e to the h itself. So as h becomes smaller, e to the h will go closer and closer to 1. Okay. So now let's see what happens. So as I scroll through, as h decreases, the central difference and the forward difference error gets closer, the answer gets close to the exact answer, which is the second column. The third and the fourth column get close to the second column. Okay. But you have to find the error. All right. So now you see, I have plotted the log of the error versus log of h. Why do I go for a log and log plot? Because I need to extract the powers. Okay. So if I ignore the round off that's going to come anyway, all right. So I see that I have an h raised to some power. I need to extract that power. So therefore, if I plot log of the error versus log of h, I'm going to get it to be linear, and therefore and the slope is going to give me the power, which is what I did. But now you see the green line initially tells me that, well, not the green lines, you see the red, the red dots is the actual the errors as it goes, and the errors are calculated using the following formula. So let me tell you how I calculated the error. So any error that I calculate is answer that I calculate. So let's say derivative calculated minus exact by the exact, the absolute. That's my error. Anything, okay? Once I know the analytic answer, I will calculate what is called the relative error, not the absolute. Because if I just take the absolute, it will not take into account the size of this number. So I scale it by the number itself, okay? So then this is called the relative error, and this gives me exactly the error tells me at which significant digit I have deviation from the expected answer. All right. So now this is how, so I plotted the log of this versus log of h, and you see initially as I decrease h, you see an improvement in the algorithm, and at some point it starts to build up, and the build up comes because you have e to the h minus 1, because as h becomes smaller, as I keep decreasing h, e to the h becomes closer and closer to 1, which is what I tried to show in that file, okay? So you see that these two numbers will start becoming so close to each other that the difference between them cannot be stored, and it starts to build up very badly. For instance, you see here, at this point, that value is complete nonsense. I'll go back to the file and show you the value that you get for the forward and central difference. It'll be complete nonsense. So instead of 2.7 something, it would be 3 point something, and in fact at one point it'll just be 0. Okay? So this in some sense illustrates for you, and you see you can of course find a fit and find the slope. So the green line here tells you that you have a slope of minus 1, okay, and the red line and the blue line gives you a slope of 1, which tells you how the error improves and builds up, okay. Sorry, I think I have said the, sorry, this is h. Yeah, I said the opposite. You see, because I didn't keep, this is log of h. So here, your error, as I decrease h, this is your improvement in the error, and here it builds up, because this one is the linear guy, which is the improvement in the algorithm's error, and here you have the round off coming in, where it becomes jumpy. Sorry, I just didn't read my scale properly, because you see my error in this has to go as a to the h plus b over h. So I have to find the linear region where the power slope is 1, and that is the blue line, okay, because h becomes small. So this is how I improve my algorithm. All right. Sorry, this is for forward and backward. If you did central, how would it change? This will become a steeper guy, and that will still remain the same, okay, because that is just a finite number divided by h. All right. Yeah, sorry, I didn't read it properly. It's the opposite. Okay, so now I will show you the file again. Now that I've done this, let me show you the file. Maybe I can point out what I want to tell you. For instance, look at this line. So h is 1.4 into 10 to the minus 15. The exact is 2.71. Forward difference gives you 2.5. Backward difference gives you 2.65. It's not very, okay. I didn't do the central. You can try central. It will perhaps be slightly better, but you have the same problem. Okay, so roughly, so you see that from the figure that I showed you, sorry, you see that you needed to, you didn't have to go all the way to 10 to the minus 14 or something like that. The improvement stops the minute h was of order 10 to the minus 7, 8, it stops. Okay, so you really cannot have an h which is very, very small. So what will happen if I now do an integration? An integration is where you you find the area under the curve. All right. Therefore, if I have to come up with an algorithm for this, what would I do? I will take this function, divide it into equal spaced parts, find the area of these geometric objects that I have constructed. Okay. If I do that, then what would you expect? Ideally, you will take this n to go to infinity, the number of these pieces I have made. Therefore, I expect that each of these rectangular strips has vanishing thickness. That's equivalent to taking h to 0 or taking the number of points you use to evaluate an integral to infinity. So you will see the exact same problem come up. You cannot arbitrarily increase the number of points. Okay, so we'll see that as an example of, so is this here what I said? So I'll just set this up. I have time till 12:15, right? It's about, okay. So I'll just set this up and pick it up tomorrow from here, which is the idea of doing an integral. So if I want to find, so given a function f of x, I have some point A, some other point B, and I want to find the area under this curve. Okay? I want to do this on a computer. If I have to do this on a computer, what would I do? Well, anyway, you will have to divide it into small, you draw vertical lines, you approximate each of these either as a rectangle. Okay, and you can already see if I decrease the width, it approximates the function better. All right, decreasing the width, and each point where I pick on, each point that I pick on the x-axis, if I count the number of points, that tells me the total number of points I have used for the integration. All right. Therefore, ideally, I should increase my number of points, take it to infinity, so that I get an exact answer. All right. But the same problem that we saw with the derivative is also going to appear in the integration. Okay. But the integration, the errors in the algorithm depends on how I am, what sort of geometrical shape I am building up here. Which means, am I approximating this, taking it as a sum of these rectangles or sum of trapezoids and so on and so forth, because each of this corresponds to approximating the function in this interval differently. If I take it as a rectangle, I just take the function to have a constant value in that interval. I do not care about the variation. So if I should not really ideally care about the variation, then this has to be very, very small. Right? Or I can do better and say, well, let me take 2 points and construct straight lines. That gives me another algorithm. Or I can say, why straight line? Let me take 3 points, and then what do I get? I'll have a quadratic. If I have 4 points, I have a cubic polynomial. So basically, in each piece, I'm going to approximate my function differently. And this approximation will decide the error that the algorithm will have. In addition, you have the overarching error, which is the finiteness of the machine, which will tell me that you can't take the n all the way to infinity. You are going to have a problem if you do that. Okay. So this is what we will do the next time we meet. And then I will tell you, so we'll set it up for a very simple case. So let's do just take it as a rectangle and the trapezoid just to illustrate what happens. And after that, I want to do something very interesting, which is have a probabilistic way of computing integrations, which is Monte Carlo. All right. So with that, we will. With that, I stop now. Thank you.